In a dying desert world ruled by cruelty and lies, a wounded human fights his way through the execution grounds to save the alien woman and her child, the last remnants of a forbidden bond between their races. As the twin suns blaze overhead, he defies an empire to reach them, driven not by destiny, but by something far older and purer: mercy. When the mother's ancient markings awaken, she sees the buried truth, that humans and her people were once one, their DNA split to keep them apart. With her final strength, she sacrifices herself, merging her life force with the light itself to save him and their child. Centuries later, explorers find the impossible: a living oasis in the heart of the endless desert. At its center stands a crystal statue of two figures, human and alien, holding a child beneath eternal shade. The site radiates warmth and life, untouched by time. Those who discover it feel echoes of memory, whispers of a promise made long ago, that even in death, compassion endures. The legend spreads as the light that never fades, a reminder that love and mercy can outlast even the stars. The twin suns blazed over the endless desert, painting everything in gold and fire. Heat shimmered off the dunes like a living thing, twisting the horizon into a trembling mirage. The wind carried no comfort, only dust, and the faint hum of something far away. A lone figure moved through it, his shadow stretching thin against the light. His name was Immerse, a human explorer who had long forgotten the sound of another voice. His ship had crashed 2 days ago, engines dead, comms silent. He walked with a limp and a cracked visor, hoping for shade, water, or maybe just a reason to keep walking. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in the desert. A cry, thin, wavering, almost swallowed by the wind. He stopped and turned his head, thinking it was his mind playing tricks again. But then it came again, so faint, it could have been the whisper of the suns themselves. "Please!" He froze. That was no mirage. It was a voice, and it wasn't human. He followed the sound, climbing over dunes that seemed to shift beneath his boots. Each step felt heavier than the last, the sun gnawing at his strength. The voice grew clearer, desperate now, like a child calling for someone who might never come. When he reached the next ridge, he saw her. A small figure, crouched beside a half-buried rock. She was trembling, her skin pale lavender and lined with faint silver veins that pulsed weakly in the heat. Her eyes, large, black, and shining, turned to him with terror. She staggered backward, clutching a small pendant around her neck. Rian raised his hands slowly. Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked, her thin lips parting. "You, human." The word came out broken, like something she had only ever heard in stories. He nodded. "Yeah, human. And you need help." Her chest rose and fell too fast, and her voice cracked as she pointed toward the horizon. "My mommy tied to the stones. Please, help her." Rian felt his stomach drop. "Tied?" She nodded frantically, her eyes filling with tears. "They leave her there. They say the sun must take her. Please, she dying." He didn't hesitate. "Show me." The child took his hand. Her touch was cold, trembling, and began leading him through the dunes. The sand burned against his suit seams, but he didn't care. They climbed over ridges and waded through wind-carved gullies until they reached a plateau where dark stones jutted out of the sand like bones. And there, at the center, was her, a woman. She was bound upright between 2 stones with ropes that looked like braided glass, their fibers digging into her flesh. Her head hung low, her silver hair matted against sunburned skin that shimmered faintly like it was trying to heal and failing. The ropes had fused into her arms where the heat had melted them into the skin. Around her ankles, the sand was darkened with something that wasn't blood. It was thicker, glowing faintly blue. Rian felt the breath leave his lungs. The child broke free from his grip and ran to her. "Mommy!" she cried, throwing herself against the woman's leg. The woman stirred weakly, her lips cracking as she whispered something in her language. Her eyes opened halfway and met his. For a moment, Rian forgot the heat, the pain, everything. Her eyes were silver, not metallic, alive. like starlight moving behind glass. And even half dead, there was something regal about her, something that didn't fit the cruelty of her situation. "Who did this to her?" he asked the girl. "My people," she said through sobs. "They say she broke the law. She touched a human once. Long ago." Rian's jaw clenched. He scanned the ropes. They weren't normal fiber, some kind of biometal. He drew his knife and pressed it against the nearest one. It hissed and smoked, but didn't cut easily. He pushed harder, the blade glowing from the heat. The child flinched at every sound. The woman made a sound, a soft gasp, and tried to speak. "Leave me." He shook his head. "Not a chance. You don't understand. If they find you, then they'll have to tie me next to you," he said, forcing the last word through gritted teeth as the rope finally split with a sharp snap. She cried out as the tension released, her body slumping forward. He caught her before she fell. Her skin burned against his gloves, radiating unnatural heat. He felt her trembling, felt the pulse beneath her ribs fluttering weakly like a trapped bird. The last rope melted under his blade, and she collapsed fully into his arms. The girl clung to her mother's leg, sobbing. "Mommy, wake up, please." Rian laid the woman gently on the sand, ripping off the lower half of his sleeve and dipping it in his canteen. He dabbed the water across her face. It hissed as if touching hot metal. Her breathing steadied a little. Then her eyes opened again, wider now, more aware. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered, her voice rasping but strangely melodic. "The suns will burn you too." He smiled faintly. "I've been burned before." The girl's hand gripped his arm. "She's queen," she said, her voice tiny, as if confessing a secret. Rian froze. "Queen." The woman looked away, her expression clouded. "Was," she said. "Not anymore." Her markings glowed faintly now, lines of silver tracing down her arms and across her chest like circuitry beneath the skin. Even half-conscious, she radiated presence. Something about her made the air itself feel heavier. Rian studied the bindings again. "These ropes, they're fused. You're hurt bad. We need to move you before." He stopped. The wind had shifted. Across the dunes, faint shadows were moving, shapes gliding low and silent. Drones. The woman saw them too. Panic flickered in her eyes. "They come," she said. "For me. And for you now." Rian looked at the girl, then back at her mother. He weighed his options for less than a heartbeat. "Then we'd better move fast." He slung her arm over his shoulders, wincing at the heat radiating from her skin. She hissed softly in pain but didn't protest. The child followed close, clutching the pendant at her neck. They descended the rocky slope as the first drone's hum grew louder. The light it cast swept across the stones like a searchlight. Rian ducked behind a boulder, pressing the mother down beside him. The girl whimpered. "Shoo!" he whispered. "It can't see us here." But the drone's beam paused, right over the spot where she had been tied. The device tilted, scanning the broken ropes. Then it turned sharply, its sensors pulsing red. The woman's breathing quickened. "They know." Rian cursed under his breath. "Then let's make them lose track." He grabbed a fragment of one of the glass ropes and hurled it down the slope. The drone's sensors caught the motion and fired a beam toward it, the rock exploding in light. In that flash, he pulled the two of them into a nearby ravine. The heat was unbearable, the air thick and shimmering. They ran or stumbled really until the drone sounds faded behind the dunes. Only then did he stop, panting, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked at her, at both of them, and realized what he'd just done. He'd made himself an enemy of whoever ruled this place. The woman tried to speak again, but her strength was nearly gone. "Why?" she whispered. He frowned. "Why what? Why save me?" He looked at the child beside her, then back at the woman's blistered hands. "Because no one else was going to." Her eyes softened, just a little. "Human?" she murmured, like tasting an old word she'd once loved and lost. As the twin suns began to sink, the desert bled into shades of crimson and violet. The wind cooled slightly, whispering through the stones. Rian began setting up a small thermal tarp from his pack, using it to shield them from the worst of the fading heat. The girl sat beside her mother, whispering something in their language, a lullaby, maybe. The woman's breathing steadied, her head resting lightly against the rock. Rian sat a short distance away, staring into the desert that stretched endlessly beyond. The drones would return. He'd need to find shelter before nightfall, before the cold replaced the burning. But when he turned back, he saw the faint glow beneath the woman's skin pulsing stronger now, as if something inside her was waking. For a moment, her eyes opened again, and she looked at him. Not as a stranger, but as if she recognized him. Her lips moved. A whisper carried on the cooling wind. "You came back." Rian blinked. "What?" But she had already drifted back into unconsciousness. The desert fell silent, the last light of the twin suns melting behind the dunes. Above, the stars began to appear, two sets of constellations that didn't belong to any human chart. Rian looked at them and felt something strange stirring in his chest. He didn't know who she was, or what law she'd broken. He didn't know why saving her felt like remembering a promise he never made. All he knew was that tomorrow, when the suns rose again, the hunters would come, and he wasn't leaving without her. The morning came with no mercy. The twin suns rose together, spilling sheets of fire across the dunes until the air itself looked molten. Rian woke to the sound of crackling heat and the faint rustle of sand whipping against the tarp. His throat felt like dry glass. The child was still asleep beside her mother, her small frame curled protectively against the woman's side. For a moment it almost looked peaceful, until the ground trembled slightly beneath him. He stood up, blinking through the glare. The horizon was alive, boiling with motion. A storm. Not a normal one, this was something else entirely. The desert shimmered as violent waves of heat bent the sky itself. He'd seen storms like this once before on a mining colony, where static particles in the air could melt through metal. "Damn," he muttered. He dropped to his knees beside the woman. "Hey, we need to move. Now." Her eyes flickered open, heavy with exhaustion. The silver in them looked dimmer this morning, dulled by pain and dehydration. "Storm," she whispered, barely audible. "Yeah, we've got maybe 10 minutes before it hits us." He lifted her arm over his shoulder again. The contact seared against his skin through the suit, but he gritted his teeth and stood, helping her up. The girl stirred, startled awake by the movement. "Where we go?" she asked, blinking up at him. "Canyon," he said, pointing toward a dark ridge to the south. "If we can get under the overhangs, the storm can't reach us." The girl nodded and wrapped her tiny hand around her mother's. Together they stumbled across the sand, the suns blazing overhead like eyes that refused to blink. Every step felt heavier, like the desert wanted them to stop, to give up, to turn into more bones hidden beneath the dunes. By the time they reached the canyon, the wind had grown vicious. It screamed through the gaps between rocks, carrying grains sharp enough to slice skin. Rian found a hollow in the wall, deep enough for shelter. He half-dragged, half-carried the woman inside, laying her against the stone. The storm hit moments later, came like an explosion. The desert roared as if alive, the sky splitting into streaks of burning gold and white. Lightning without thunder, pure light, cracking the air and sending shimmering dust raining down. The temperature spiked so fast the canyon walls began to glow faintly red. The girl whimpered, pressing herself against her mother. Rian quickly pulled the thermal tarp from his pack and spread it over them, anchoring the corners with stones. The heat pushed at it like a living thing, but the tarp held. He sat on the edge, panting, watching the light flicker through the seams. The woman was still barely conscious. He opened his last water vial and lifted it to her lips. She drank slowly, her cracked lips parting just enough for the liquid to pass. For the first time he saw her look at him. Not as a stranger, but with something else. Recognition, maybe, or disbelief. "You," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, but her tone had changed. "You shouldn't exist here." He frowned. "That makes two of us." Her eyes didn't waver. "Your face. It is the same." The same as who? Her gaze drifted toward the storm outside. The one I saved. Rian froze, the words cutting through him. You saved a human? Her head dipped weakly. Long ago, before the exile. He wanted to ask more, but another flash outside silenced him. The sky burst into blinding light, then dimmed. For a moment, the entire canyon glowed like a furnace. The air buzzed with static. He could feel his hair stand on end beneath the suit's collar. He reached for his bag, checking the comm unit again. Dead. The radiation was frying everything. No signal. No help. Just them. He turned back to the woman. You said you were exiled. Why? Her breathing was shallow now. For breaking the law of purity. He frowned. Purity? What law is that? Her eyes met his. We are forbidden to touch what is not of us. Forbidden to mix blood. Forbidden to see beauty in what was made by another. Rian felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the storm. So you helped a human. And that was enough. Her lips curved faintly, a ghost of a smile. Enough to end a dynasty. He stared at her markings again, the intricate patterns glowing faintly across her collarbone. Royal. The girl had said it before. The woman wasn't just anyone. She was a queen, a fallen one. The storm howled louder, drowning out thought. Rian huddled closer to the rock, pulling the tarp tighter. He could feel the heat through his boots now. He closed his eyes and tried to ignore the buzzing in his ears. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. It was hard to tell time when the sky outside refused to stay still. But slowly, the sound began to fade. The glow outside dimmed. When he finally lifted the tarp edge, the world had turned gold again. The desert stretched endlessly beyond the canyon, smoke rising from where the dunes had fused into glass. The girl stirred beside her mother. Is Storm gone? For now, Rian said. He climbed out, scanning the horizon. No drones. No movement. Just silence. When he turned back, the girl was wiping dust from her mother's forehead. Her tiny fingers traced the silver lines along the woman's skin, and for a brief second they pulsed with light. The woman's eyes fluttered open. Rian knelt beside them. You need rest. We'll wait here until night. The woman nodded faintly. You, still here. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him for a long moment. Really looked at him. Her silver eyes reflected the light of both suns, and for the first time, there was something like sorrow there. Your kind once stood beside us, before everything broke. He leaned closer. What broke? Her voice turned to a whisper. Memory. Then she closed her eyes again. As the suns began to sink, Rian built a small heat trap using fragments of the tarp and his suit's thermal cell. The temperature dropped fast once the light faded, and the canyon filled with soft, whispering wind. The stars above came out sharp and cold. The girl crept closer to him as her mother slept. You were like the one in Mommy's story, she said softly. What story? The one she told me when I was little, about a man who fell from the sky. He was hurt and she helped him, but her people found out. They said she was impure. Rian's chest tightened. What happened to the man? The girl looked down at her hands. He died. Mommy cried for many days. Then they took her crown. He said nothing for a while. The wind carried faint echoes through the canyon, ghostly whispers of sand shifting against stone. He stared at the stars, wondering which one of them was home. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. What's your name? The girl hesitated. Lyra. He smiled faintly. Lyra. That's a constellation where I come from. Her eyes widened slightly, reflecting the starlight. Then maybe we meant to meet. Rian didn't answer, but as he looked at her and the sleeping woman beside her, he couldn't shake the feeling that something far older than chance had led him here. The night deepened. A faint hum echoed through the canyon, the sound of distant engines sweeping across the desert. Drones again. Searching. He reached for his weapon, eyes narrowing. They're not giving up. Lyra's voice trembled. Will they find us? He shook his head. Not tonight. But deep down he knew the truth. They would. And when they did, the desert would burn again. Rian looked at the woman, her face calm in the moonlight, her skin faintly glowing like a dying star, and he felt a strange pull in his chest. Recognition, not from memory, but from something deeper, as if part of him had been waiting his whole life to find her. He didn't understand it yet, but he would, soon. And somewhere in the dunes beyond the canyon, a signal pulsed into the dark, carried on the same frequencies that once linked two worlds now divided by hate. The wind that swept through the canyon carried the scent of iron and dust, whispering against the carved walls like a ghost of the desert itself. The suns hung low, bleeding amber light over the stones, and the human Rian sat near the cave mouth, staring out at the storm-scarred horizon. Behind him, faint breathing stirred the silence. The alien woman lay on a mat of woven reeds, her skin still marked by the ropes that had burned into her flesh. Her daughter, small and quiet, slept with her head against her mother's side, clutching the same fragment of cloth Rian had wrapped around her when he found them. He hadn't spoken much since then. There were questions he wanted to ask. Too many, but something about her presence made silence feel safer, almost sacred. When she stirred, it was slow, as if her body were learning how to move again. Her eyes opened, not with fear, not with suspicion, but with the cautious awareness of someone who had lived too long between cruelty and mercy. "The storm is gone," she whispered, her voice still coarse, the syllables edged with a strange accent. Rian nodded. "For now. The second sun will fall soon. It'll cool a little." She seemed to study him as he spoke, her gaze drawn not to his face, but to the dull insignia on his shoulder, the faded emblem of a human research unit that had disbanded decades ago. "That mark," she said, her tone soft but uncertain. "It belonged to the ones who came before." Rian frowned. "Before?" She didn't answer at first. Her hand drifted to her chest, where the skin shimmered faintly under the thin light, an odd luminescence that pulsed just beneath the surface. He noticed it, the faint glow that shaped itself like a circle intersected by 3 lines, a human symbol, the same one etched on his own field medallion. "What is that?" he asked. She hesitated, then pressed her palm over it. "A scar," she murmured. "But it wasn't always." Her daughter stirred awake and blinked sleepily, looking between them. "Mama," the child said softly, "you said he was different, like the one from before." The woman's expression tightened, pain flickering across her face. Not physical, but old and buried deep. She turned her gaze back to Rian. "You look like him, the man from the fire years, the one I pulled from the sky." Rian felt something cold slip into his stomach. "You saved a human?" The alien woman nodded once, her eyes distant. "He fell from a broken ship. The others wanted to burn him. They said he carried disease, corruption. But he spoke the same word you just did. Mercy. I did not know what it meant then." Rian's breath caught. He leaned closer, heart hammering. "When? How long ago?" "Before your sons faded," she said. "Before the war that ended the air." That couldn't be right. The timeline didn't fit. Her words described something that had happened nearly 70 years ago, around the time the first deep space contact missions vanished. "Do you remember his name?" he asked, voice low. She looked uncertain, as if searching through memories older than her body should hold. Then she touched the faintly glowing scar and whispered, "He told me his name before he died. Rian Mercer." The world tilted for a second. The fire crackled, but it felt far away. That was his name, his own name, but also his great-grandfather's. Rian's mind spun through the fragments of family lore, the ones told in half-truths about an expedition lost beyond mapped space, a ship that never returned. "That's not possible," he muttered. "He disappeared long before your people made contact with ours." The woman's gaze softened. "Time burns differently here," she said. "Maybe your kind does not know that yet." He wanted to dismiss it, to anchor himself in logic, but then she reached up and unwrapped a thin layer of the cloth around her arm. Beneath it, etched into the faintly scarred flesh, were human letters. The desert air trembled in his lungs as he read them. "Do not fear what remembers you," his grandfather's motto. the same line engraved on the family relic he carried in his chest pocket. The one said to have come from the lost explorer's log. He pulled the medallion free, his hands shaking. When the woman's eyes fell on it, the glow under her skin brightened as if responding to it, like a heartbeat syncing with another across time. "He gave it to me," she whispered, "before the others found us. He said if anyone ever bore this mark again, I would know what I did mattered." Rian's voice broke. "You saved him. And now you saved me," she finished, her expression unreadable. "But you should not have. My people will come for me again. They call me unpure." Her daughter clung to her hand. "They said we were cursed because of you, Mama. Because of the scar that speaks." Rian looked between them, torn between disbelief and the overwhelming pull of something bigger than both their worlds. "That scar," he said. "It reacts to my medallion. It's human tech, or something derived from it. It remembers," she said simply. "It carries what he was. I have seen things in dreams. Images of oceans, metal towers, voices that call my name though I was not yet born." Her tone grew distant, almost reverent. "He told me once that memory is the last form of life that cannot be killed." The firelight flickered over her face, and for a moment Rian saw something else reflected in her eyes. A city drowned in light, human ships in orbit, the echo of battles long gone. He felt as though the canyon itself remembered. "If your people exiled you," he said slowly, "then they must fear something you know." She nodded, her fingers brushing the scar again. "They fear what we shared. He told me that if we ever understood one another, neither of our kinds would ever be the same again." The child whispered. "He said the stars would listen." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. A new storm was forming. Not sand, not heat, but electric, blue-veined clouds crawling over the sky. Rian stepped closer to the cave entrance and felt static rise on his arms. "That's not natural," he said. "It's drawing toward us." The woman rose weakly, her gaze fixed on the glow that mirrored her scar's light. "It knows," she murmured. "The memory in me is calling." Rian turned to her. "Calling what?" She met his eyes, her voice trembling with awe and fear. "The same thing that fell from your sky long ago. The one I saved." For a long, breathless moment, neither of them moved. The storm above split open with light, and a sound like a ship's awakening echoed across the desert. The first sign of them came at dawn. A sharp, mechanical hum that didn't belong to wind or sky. Rian woke instantly, his instincts honed by months of solitude on hostile worlds. The air trembled with vibration, low and rhythmic, growing louder with every heartbeat. He crawled to the mouth of the canyon and peered toward the horizon. Beyond the dunes, something shimmered in the rising light, metallic wings slicing through heat haze, moving in deliberate formation. Drones. Dozens of them. Sleek, oval-bodied machines with translucent panels that pulsed like breathing glass. He'd seen their kind before, circling war relics and ruins, but never this deep into the uncharted sands. These weren't scouts. They were hunters. He ducked back into the cave. The woman was already awake, the faint glow of her scar visible even in the dim light. She looked at him with quiet dread. "They've found us," she said, voice brittle. Her daughter clung to her, eyes wide. "They can sense my blood. The mark of the exile calls to them." Rian's pulse quickened. "We can't stay here," he said. "There's no cover. Once they scan the canyon, it's over." She hesitated, then pointed east, toward a vast, half-buried ridge. "There is a place, old even before the city was born. My mother said it was cursed, but it hides from their eyes." He didn't question her. There wasn't time. He grabbed his gear, slung his rifle, and motioned for them to move. The suns were still climbing when they left the canyon, their shadows stretching long across the glowing sand. The air was heavy with static. Every step stirred a faint shimmer, like the ground itself was alive. Behind them, the drones grew closer, tiny dots in the sky that flashed with coordinated light. "They'll sweep in patterned lines," Rian said. We need to break visibility before they triangulate. The woman's voice was faint but steady. The ruins drink light. You'll see. And she was right. After what felt like hours of blistering march, the dunes gave way to something darker. Stone half buried under centuries of sand. Pillars jutted from the ground like the ribs of a long-dead creature, their surfaces etched with symbols that time had almost devoured. As they approached, the air changed. The constant heat lessened, and sound itself seemed to dampen, as though the world were holding its breath. Here, she whispered. The ones who watch the sands. Rian knelt, brushing sand away from a slab near the entrance. Beneath layers of grit, a carving emerged. A depiction of two figures. One human, one alien, standing side by side beneath a shared sun. His breath caught. That's impossible, he murmured. These carvings predate our contact by centuries. Our records say we found you, she said quietly. But the elders burned the truth long ago. They feared it meant we were not pure. He ran his fingers along the carving's lines, tracing the intertwined hands. The artistry was unmistakable. This wasn't myth. It was memory, something both their species had chosen to forget. A shadow passed over the sand outside. The drones. The hum grew louder. Rian gestured sharply. Inside now. They slipped through a narrow gap between the pillars, descending into a hollow chamber beneath the dunes. The walls were covered in more carvings, some half-erased, others illuminated faintly by crystals embedded in the stone. The air was cool and metallic. What is this place? He asked. A tomb. The woman shook her head. Not a tomb. A promise. The child tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward a mural at the far end. Look, the stars. He followed her gaze. The mural showed a sky filled with constellations, but among them, unmistakable, was the outline of Earth's solar system. Earth. He felt a chill crawl down his spine. How could your people have known this? Maybe it wasn't ours who carved it, she said softly. Rian approached the mural. Beneath the depiction of the twin suns was an inscription. Faded, but in a language he could partly recognize. The bond that built the dawn shall sleep beneath the desert until memory awakens. Memory, he whispered. The same word her scar had pulsed to when it reacted to his medallion. The same thing his ancestor had spoken of before the First War. It was all connected somehow. Above them, faint echoes rippled through the stone. The drones sweeping overhead, scanning the dunes. Their pulses sent tremors through the air, but the readings seemed to distort as they reached the ruin. Whatever this place was, it hid them perfectly. They can't see us, he said. It's like the stone bends their signal. It remembers how to protect us, she murmured. He turned to her, the light from the crystals casting pale reflections on her face. You said they call you a traitor queen. Why? She hesitated, looking at the carvings of humans and aliens standing together. Because I spoke of what I found here once before. I said the sands remembered peace. They called it heresy. They said purity is survival, that mixing is decay. When I refused to bow, they tied me to the rock. The pain in her voice wasn't anger. It was exhaustion. A lifetime of being right in a world built on lies. Rian looked at her scar again, still glowing faintly. Your people buried the truth, he said. But it's right here. Proof that we were once allies or more. Allies? She repeated, tasting the word like it was both sacred and dangerous. Then why did we forget? Because someone wanted us to, he said. And maybe the ones who built this place left a way to remember. As he spoke, the crystal light flickered. A faint hum began deep within the chamber. Ancient machinery reawakening after ages of silence. Dust fell from the ceiling. The woman stepped back, eyes wide. What did you do? Nothing, he said quickly. Then he saw it. The medallion on his chest glowing in sync with the crystals. They were responding to him. The mural shimmered, and for a heartbeat, the carved figures seemed to move. Hands parting, faces turning toward him. The symbols along the wall rearranged themselves like circuitry aligning. A beam of pale light emerged from the mural and struck the center of the floor, revealing a circular platform etched with human and alien runes intertwined. The air pulsed with low-frequency vibration, almost like a heartbeat. "It's waking something," Rian whispered. The woman looked terrified. "The Watchers." "Who?" "The ones who built this place. They never died, they became the desert. They see through the sands." As if summoned by her words, a tremor rippled beneath their feet. The sand outside shifted violently, and the drones above suddenly dropped from formation, crashing one by one into the dunes as if yanked from the sky by an unseen force. Rian grabbed her arm. "We need to move." But she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the platform, where symbols began to spiral faster, the light intensifying until it illuminated the entire chamber. "They're listening," she whispered. "After all this time, they've heard us again." And then, from deep within the ruin, a voice, neither human nor alien, ancient and resonant, filled the air, speaking in both their languages at once. "The bond is not forgotten. The memory lives." The light surged upward, breaking through the sand above like a beacon to the heavens. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the city-state that had exiled her turned its eyes toward the desert, realizing their greatest secret had just awoken. The storm outside had quieted, but the ruin still hummed faintly as if something deep within it hadn't stopped listening. The air was cooler now, almost breathable. Rian sat cross-legged near a pile of cracked equipment, the pale glow of his damaged comm device casting a dull shimmer across the stone floor. His hands worked carefully, cleaning out sand from its circuits with the edge of a blade. The alien child was asleep, curled beneath her mother's arm, and for the first time in days, silence didn't feel like danger. It felt like the breath before understanding. "If I can get the long wave back," Rian muttered half to himself. "Maybe I can reach orbit. Maybe someone's still out there." The alien woman, Hari, he now knew her name, watched him quietly. Her eyes, still faintly luminescent, followed every movement of his fingers. "You think your kind will come for you?" she asked softly. "After all this time?" "They always come," he said. "Sometimes too late, but they come." Her lips curved faintly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "Ours come only when they need to bury what they fear." He looked up at her, the exhaustion in her face shadowed by something else, an awareness of the ruin itself, as if it were alive around her. "You really believe this place remembers?" he asked. "I don't believe," she murmured. "I know." A faint spark jumped from his comm's cracked panel, followed by a flicker on its tiny display. He frowned, tapping the edge. "Come on, don't die on me now." The device suddenly gave a shrill chirp, then went dark again. But something else responded. The mural wall behind them pulsed faintly, its carvings igniting like veins under translucent skin. The crystals in the chamber brightened one by one, resonating with a low, harmonic sound. Lethary's eyes widened. "You touched the songstone's frequency." "The what?" Before he could react, a section of the wall behind him split open, sand and dust raining down as stone slabs rearranged themselves with ancient precision. A circular vault door emerged, engraved with intertwined symbols, human script and alien glyphs overlapping like a code meant for both species to read. "Rian," Lethary's voice trembled now. "This is older than the city, older than the schism." He approached slowly, feeling his pulse hammer. His medallion was glowing again, reacting to the same energy that had awakened the chamber before. He held it up, and the vault's symbols shimmered in response. A deep click echoed through the ruin. The door began to slide open. Inside, a soft blue light spilled out, washing over the chamber like the reflection of a calm ocean. Dust swirled in slow motion, and in the center of the vault floated a single holographic projector, ancient but unmistakably human in design. Rian froze. "No way." He stepped closer, brushing off layers of sand and residue until a faint emblem appeared on the side. ES Expedition 41. Covenant Initiative. "That's Earth's mark," he whispered. "That program was lost over 100 years ago." The projector flickered once, then came to life. A man's face appeared in shimmering blue light, wearing a scientist's uniform from the early interstellar age. His voice crackled, distorted by centuries of decay, but still clear enough to cut through the silence. This is Dr. Elias Mercer, xenogeneticist, Covenant Initiative. If you are seeing this, it means the archive survived the collapse. Humanity and the Valerie people once stood as one. This world, your world, was the site of the first synthesis. A bond written not in ink or law, but in blood. Rian's mouth went dry. Mercer, that name. He swallowed hard. That was his family name. His ancestor. The hologram continued. We believed we could end war through kinship, to merge the best of both species, to heal the divide before it ever began. But the experiment failed. Not because of the science, but because of fear. They destroyed the records. We sealed the truth here. If you find this, remember, there was once a covenant between us. The image flickered, and then another voice spoke. Softer, melodic, undeniably alien. Elias, don't go. Rian's head snapped toward Lethari, but she was standing utterly still, eyes wide, trembling. The voice from the recording spoke again, and there was no doubt. It was hers, perfectly hers. I told you it would destroy us, the holographic woman said. Your people will forget. Mine will call me impure. And the sun will burn until it forgets our names. Rian's skin went cold. He turned to her slowly. That's you. She shook her head violently. It can't be. But the hologram kept playing. The human in the recording reached toward her image, his hand passing through light. Then I'll leave this memory for them to find, so they'll know what we were. The two holographic figures stood together for a moment, their outlines merging in the shifting blue glow. Then the recording froze, looped, and vanished into silence. For several heartbeats, no one spoke. The air felt charged with 1,000 ghosts. Rian stepped closer to Lethari. How could that be your voice? That message is over a century old. She backed away, her breath shallow. I don't know. I wasn't even born then. But the way you reacted, the scar, the symbols, the ruins recognizing you, what if... He hesitated, the idea forming even as he said it. What if you're connected to her? Not by blood, but by memory. Her eyes flickered, golden light sparking in their depths. Memory is sacred, she whispered. Our kind can inherit fragments from those bound to the old light. But no one has ever remembered a human. The child stirred in her sleep, murmuring something in a half-dream. The voices under the sand. Rian turned back to the vault. Dr. Elias Mercer, he murmured again. The name lingered on his tongue like a pulse from the past. He was one of ours, and your voice was with him. Lethari pressed a hand to her temple, trembling. I can see flashes, not my memories, but hers. Stars, fire, a laboratory near the twin moons. Elias holding my hand while alarms blared. She gasped, eyes wide with pain. They separated us. He said, don't forget. And then, darkness. Maybe that's why they buried this place, Rian said softly. Because if anyone found it, they'd realize the truth, that humans and your people were never enemies to begin with. We were family. The ruin around them pulsed again, faint and rhythmic, as though responding to the word family. The crystals brightened, and for a brief moment, Rian could swear he heard voices whispering from the stone itself. Echoes of those who had built this place, reminding them it wasn't just history. It was unfinished. Lethari looked at him through tears. Then why did it end in fire? Because fear always burns faster than truth, he said quietly. Outside, a faint rumble rolled across the desert, distant, mechanical, and growing. The drones were coming again, but this time not as hunters. The sound was deeper, heavier. Ships. Lethari's scar pulsed once more, brighter than ever before. She staggered, gripping the wall. They felt it, she said. The city. They felt the memory unlock. Rian turned toward the surface tunnel. Then we have to move. If they get their hands on this data, they'll erase it again. But as he reached for the projector, the child's small voice called out behind him, calm, certain. You can't take it. It doesn't belong to now. He froze. What did you say? The girl's eyes glowed faintly in the blue light, and for the first time, her voice didn't sound like a child's at all. The covenant never died. It just forgot how to speak. Then the crystals dimmed, the vault sealed itself shut, and the desert above them began to tremble like a living thing waking from a long dream. The twin suns sank low behind the dunes, their dying light turning the desert into a vast sea of fire and shadow. The heat gave way to wind now, cold, whispering through the canyon like the breath of ghosts. Rian stood at the mouth of the ruin, watching the horizon flicker with distant lights. They were moving fast, too steady to be natural. The hunters had found them again. He could hear the faint rhythmic thump of their crafts cutting through the desert air. Metallic shadows glided low across the dunes, their searchlights weaving silver threads over the sands. Lethari stood beside him, her breathing shallow, her eyes reflecting the faint glow of the crystals within the ruin. The child, Seelai, clung to her mother's hand, silent but wide-eyed, the fear she didn't speak echoing in her trembling. They will come for me first, Lethari whispered. They always do. They'll smell the impurity in my blood. Rian adjusted his pack and loaded the plasma rifle, the old model whining softly as its energy core powered up. Then they'll have to get through me. She turned toward him sharply, her expression torn between gratitude and dread. You don't understand, human. If they see you with us, they will not just kill you. They will erase you. They'll burn your name from the record of stars. Leave now while you still can. Take Seelai. She'll be safer with you. Rian froze. You're asking me to abandon you. I'm asking you to live, she said softly. For both of us. The words hit something deep inside him, something older than fear. He looked down at the child, at the reflection of two worlds in her small, frightened face. No, he said. You saved one of mine once. Maybe my ancestor. That means the debt runs through me. I'm not leaving you behind. Before she could answer, the night exploded. A blinding flare streaked across the canyon, slamming into the dune near the ruin and throwing sand into the air like a storm of knives. The shockwave knocked them back. The child screamed. Rian grabbed her, shielding her with his body as shards of glass and stone rained down. The hunters had arrived. Metallic figures emerged from the shadows. Slender, insect-like soldiers in mirrored armor, their eyes glowing with blue fire. They moved in unison, their weapons humming with energy. The leader's voice echoed through a translator helm, flat and merciless. Return the traitor queen. The sands will take the rest. Rian raised his weapon. You want her, you'll have to earn it. The hunters didn't hesitate. Energy bolts seared the air, cutting through the dark like white lightning. Rian dove behind a broken pillar, firing back. His shots hit two of them square in the chest, sending bursts of light and shards into the night. But there were too many, 5, then 8, closing in from all sides. Rian! Lethari cried out. He turned just in time to see one of the hunters leap toward him, blade raised. He blocked the strike with his rifle's frame, the impact jolting through his arms, and slammed the butt into the hunter's helm. The creature staggered, and Rian fired point-blank into its chest. It fell, but not before slicing a deep line across his shoulder. Pain burned hot. Blood soaked through his sleeve, but he didn't stop. He turned to cover Lethari and the child, shouting over the chaos, "Run! Get her inside!" But Lethari didn't run. She stood motionless, eyes closed, her hands trembling as she pressed them to the sand. The scar along her chest glowed brighter, pulsing in rhythm with the crystals of the ruin behind them. The ground itself began to vibrate. The hunters hesitated, sensing it. She's summoning something. One hissed. Rian fired again, but the tremor grew too strong. His shots went wide. He stumbled backward as the sand around Lethari began to swirl upward, forming a spiraling vortex of light and dust. Her voice rose in a language he couldn't understand. Ancient, melodic, filled with both sorrow and power. Then came the pulse. It erupted from her body in a blinding wave of energy, silent yet deafening, sweeping across the canyon like the heartbeat of a god. The hunters froze mid-step, their armor cracked, their weapons disintegrating in bursts of blue flame. One by one, they fell to their knees, their metallic bodies turning to glass before shattering into dust. The storm of light faded slowly. Silence returned, broken only by the wind. Rian blinked, vision blurred from the brightness. The air still hummed with energy, faint and dying. He turned and his breath caught. Lethari was on her knees. The glow from her scar had dimmed to a faint ember. Her skin, once radiant with the warmth of her kind, had gone pale and translucent. The energy pulse had drained her. The very force that had saved them was now consuming her. He rushed to her side, dropping the rifle, ignoring his own bleeding shoulder. Hey, stay with me," he said, his voice cracking. Her breathing was shallow. "It's all right," she whispered. "It had to end this way. My body cannot hold what was meant for two souls." He took her hand, feeling the chill creeping into it. "Don't talk like that. You just saved us. You're not dying here." Her eyes flickered open, soft and glowing faintly gold. "You're wrong, Rian Mercer." He stiffened. "How do you know my name?" Her lips curved faintly. "Because I remember it. The one I saved before, he said it too. He said mercy runs in your blood." Rian froze. The desert wind howled through the canyon like a mournful voice. "You mean Elias Mercer, my ancestor?" Her gaze unfocused, as though she were seeing two times at once. "He looked like you, fought like you, stubborn, foolish human." Her fingers tightened weakly around his. "You carry his fire." He didn't know what to say. The child knelt beside them, tears streaking her cheeks, whispering words in her mother's tongue. The crystals of the ruin began to dim one by one, their light fading like dying stars. Lethari's breathing hitched. She turned her face toward him, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You asked me once why I believed this place remembers. It's because memory is the only thing that survives the end." He shook his head, trying to steady his voice. "You're not at the end. You hear me? You're not." But she smiled faintly and lifted a trembling hand to his cheek. "Do you know what your people taught mine long ago?" He swallowed. "What?" She looked right into his eyes, the last of her strength burning through her words. "Mercy." The word fell like a prayer. Then her hand slipped from his face, and her body went still. For a long time, Rian didn't move. The desert was silent again, the dunes still glowing faintly under the twin moons. The wind brushed past him, carrying the last warmth of her voice into the night. Seelai crawled into her mother's arms, crying softly. Rian could do nothing but sit there, his hands stained with sand and blood, staring at the lifeless body of the woman who had saved him twice, once with her power, and once with a single human word. Far on the horizon, new lights flickered. More hunters, or perhaps something worse. But Rian barely saw them. His gaze was fixed on Lethari's scar, which still glowed faintly, pulsing weakly as though refusing to die. Then, just before the light faded completely, it formed a single symbol. Not alien, human, the symbol of the covenant. Under the twin suns' relentless gaze, the desert was a world made of fire and whispers. The human staggered across the dunes, half delirious from exhaustion, with the alien woman's fragile body in his arms. Her skin shimmered faintly, the once royal glow now dimmed by the weight of pain and lost time. Her child, the small creature who had begged him for help days ago, stumbled beside him, clutching a broken piece of cloth that once belonged to her mother's robe. "Just a little farther," he muttered, though his throat was raw and every breath burned. He could feel her heartbeat slowing, a rhythm fading under the weight of heat and exhaustion. Then, through the rising waves of mirage and sand, he spotted the silhouette of an outpost, a cluster of rusted towers leaning into the wind, long abandoned by both species. He pushed forward. When he reached the outer gates, the metal shrieked as he forced them open, dust falling like ash. Inside was silence, only the sound of old wind turbines turning lazily, groaning like ghosts. He found a shade under a fallen roof beam, laid her down gently, and poured the last drops of his canteen onto her lips. Her skin flickered, glowing faintly as if drinking the light itself. The child knelt beside her, whispering words in a language he barely understood, something between prayer and song. Hours passed before she stirred. When she finally opened her eyes, they no longer held the cold gleam of royalty but something fragile, something deeply human. She looked at his bandaged arms, the blood seeping through cloth, the exhaustion in his eyes. For a long moment, she just stared. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice hoarse but steady. "Why do you help me? After all your kind lost because of mine." He looked at her then, not as an alien, not as a queen, but as someone who had once been left behind to die, same as her. "Because no one else would," he said simply. She blinked, and in that instant, something ancient flickered in her gaze. A memory surfacing, a reflection not from this life. She had heard those words before. A battlefield long ago, smoke and chaos. A wounded human soldier reaching out a hand to her and saying the same thing. But that couldn't be. That was another century, another war, another world. Her breath caught, and she touched her chest where the faintly glowing scar pulsed beneath her skin. "You can't be him," she whispered. "He died before my people ever saw peace." "Maybe I'm not," he said quietly, "but maybe he left something behind." Outside, the desert wind rose again, carrying with it the sound of distant engines. The hunters hadn't given up. They were tracking the energy pulse she had unleashed the night before, the one that had nearly killed her. The human's comms device flickered to life for a second, catching a faint signal from orbit. A human distress channel, still functional after decades of silence. He could call for extraction. He could leave this world behind. But when he looked at the child clinging to her mother's hand, he knew he wouldn't. Instead, he reinforced the metal doors with fallen beams, sealed cracks in the walls, and set up the outpost's old defense grid. The systems coughed back to life, ancient and unstable. "They'll come," she warned. "My people never forgive a traitor, and now they'll kill you for helping one." "Let them come," he said, voice calm, eyes cold with quiet resolve. "I've seen worse sons than these." She studied him, a faint tremor in her expression. A mixture of fear, admiration, and something else she couldn't name. When she spoke again, her words carried both warning and confession. "If they find us, they'll destroy the proof of what we were, of what we could have been. The covenant, the truth, all of it will vanish again." He met her gaze. "Then we don't let them." That night, while the child slept curled between them, she reached out and traced the faint scar on his wrist, the mark of an old injury he couldn't remember getting. Her touch triggered a flicker of light in the air, as though reality itself had glitched. For one heartbeat, he saw the memory not as a dream but as something real. A woman standing beside a human soldier under a sky filled with burning ships, whispering, "Because no one else would." Then it vanished. She drew her hand back, trembling. "Your blood," she murmured. "It carries echoes." "Of what?" "Of the first bond," she said softly. "Before the war, before the purge." Before he could ask more, a faint mechanical hum rose from beyond the dunes. The horizon pulsed with light drones, scanning for life forms. He stood, readying his old plasma rifle, eyes fixed on the storm of dust ahead. She rose too, weak but resolute, pressing a hand to his arm. "You'll die if you stay." "Maybe," he said, checking the rifle's power cell. "But at least I'll die doing something that matters." She stared at him for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Then you truly are one of them." "One of who?" he asked. "The ones who stayed," she said, voice trembling. "The ones who never left when the stars turned against us." The name struck him like a half-remembered legend, the title given to the human explorers who refused to abandon the dying frontlines centuries ago. The ones who stayed. But they were myths. None had survived. Outside, the air shimmered with heat and movement. The drones were close now, the sand vibrating with their sonic pulses. The woman reached for her daughter, whispering something into her ear. A word that made the child's eyes glow faintly blue. "If we don't make it," she said to him, "promise me she will live to see the covenant fulfilled." He hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "I promise." The door shuddered as the first pulse blast hit. He raised his weapon. The child hid her face in her mother's lap. The woman whispered one last phrase in her dying language, something that sounded both like a curse and a prayer. And then the outpost filled with light, too bright, too sudden. When the dust settled, only silence remained. The dunes outside were burning, and in the ruins, beneath twisted metal and fractured glass, a faint glow pulsed still. 3 heartbeats, one human, one alien, and one that had never belonged to either world. The city rose from the horizon like a wound that refused to heal. Miles of metallic towers twisted upward from the red desert, bound together by chains of living metal that pulsed with faint light. It was said the city's architects had woven the agony of their ancestors into its walls, so that the screams of the past would remind the living to obey. From a distance, it looked like a crown, glorious, terrible, and cruel. The human stared at it from the ridge, dust caking his skin, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Beside him, the alien woman hid her royal markings under torn cloth, while her daughter clutched a small pendant shaped like a broken star. The child's eyes shimmered faintly. "He's there," she said, pointing toward the heart of the city, where the chains converged into a black spire. "My father. I can feel him." The mother said nothing. Her jaw tightened, and she looked away. The human caught the flicker of grief in her eyes, but didn't press. He'd learned by now that her silence was its own kind of confession. The city's air was thick with heat and static when they entered under the cover of night. The outer rings were filled with labor pits, rows upon rows of aliens chained to glowing pylons, their bodies absorbing radiation from the twin suns to power the city's heart. The human stomach turned at the sight. "They call it the City of Chains," she said softly, almost to herself. "Every life here feeds another. The ones at the top forget they were ever bound." He watched her face as she spoke, the faint shimmer beneath her skin betraying emotions she tried to hide. "And you were one of them once," he said quietly. "At the top." Her silence was the answer. They moved through the shadows of the lower streets, where the air stank of oil and fear. Through the veil of smoke, he saw the children, thin, pale, their eyes dulled by obedience. None looked up as they passed. The mother gripped her daughter's hand tighter, her breath trembling. "If they see her eyes glow, they'll know," she whispered. "She's half of me, and half of something they fear." "Half of hope," he said. "Hide that well." By dawn, they reached the central district, heavily guarded, armored gates reflecting the twin suns. He scanned the perimeter, noting guard routes, sensor nodes, and blind spots in the energy field. His mind worked the way a soldier's always did: measure, calculate, risk, act. "We can get in through the drainage conduits," he murmured. "Leads right under the detention sectors." The mother shook her head. "They sealed those after the last rebellion. Then we make them unsealed," he said, and before she could argue, he was already moving. They found the access tunnel behind a scrapyard where broken drones lay stacked like bones. Inside, it stank of rust and decay. He crawled first, hands scraping metal, until they emerged beneath the execution platforms. The sound above was unmistakable. Chains tightening, boots stomping, voices chanting. He peered through a narrow grate and froze. Dozens of prisoners knelt in a circle, heads bowed, as overseers prepared the ritual blades. "They're not soldiers," he whispered. "They're civilians." The mother closed her eyes, and her body trembled with anger. "They are the impure," she said bitterly. "Those who dared to speak of unity." The child clutched her mother's arm. "He's not there," she whispered. "I can't feel him anymore." Her voice cracked on the word "anymore." The mother's expression shattered for just a moment. "He's gone," she said softly. "Your father was executed years ago. They made sure I watched." The child's lips parted, confusion giving way to quiet devastation. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Because hope was the only thing that kept you alive." The human turned away from the grate. Then let's give her a new reason to live. He pulled the plasma detonator from his belt and set the timer. We'll hit the pylons, free the prisoners, and run for the outer rings before they can re-engage lockdown. She looked at him like she couldn't decide if he was brave or insane. If we do this, she warned, you'll make yourself an enemy of the entire Dominion. Wouldn't be the first time, he said with a grim smile. The explosion ripped through the lower decks, a sound like thunder trapped inside a furnace. The shockwave toppled pylons, and for the first time in years, the chains of the city broke. Not many, but enough to make the towers shudder. The slaves rose, blinking in disbelief, then ran. Chaos spread like wildfire. Sirens howled. Energy rifles blazed in the distance. In the confusion, the human led the prisoners through the breach, shielding them with stolen armor. But then something strange happened. The mother fell to her knees, clutching her chest. The mark on her skin, the royal seal that had been dim for days, flared suddenly with searing light. The air around her rippled, and a sound like a whispering chorus filled the air. Access granted. The words weren't spoken aloud. They came from everywhere at once. From the city, from the metal, from the chains themselves. The human turned to her. What did you do? Her eyes glowed silver. It's not me, she breathed. It's the network. It's remembering. The walls came alive with light. Holograms flickered. Scenes of the past. Memories embedded in the city's core. The towers projected images of humans and aliens together, building, laughing, creating. The city of chains hadn't always been a prison. It had once been a sanctuary. The mother gasped, clutching her temples as visions poured into her mind. They erased it, she said, her voice trembling. The council purged the archives, made us believe unity was sin. But the truth, it's here. The human knelt beside her. Can you extract it? No, she whispered. It's extracting me. Her body convulsed as more memories surged. Scenes she couldn't have lived yet remembered anyway. A human scientist smiling at her under a glass sky. His hand on hers. Promise made. A child unborn. That's impossible, she gasped. That was before I existed. He grabbed her shoulders. Stay with me. He said my name, she whispered through the pain. Before I was even born. The ground shook violently as the city's defense systems rebooted. The chains began to reattach themselves, wrapping around fallen towers and sealing the fractures. We have to go, he shouted. But as he turned, the child was gone, drawn toward the spire where the chains converged. The mother screamed her name, but her voice was drowned in the roar of collapsing metal. The human ran after the girl, dodging debris, shouting over the chaos. Wait, come back. The child stopped halfway up the stairs of the spire, her eyes wide, glowing bright blue. She's calling me, she said softly. Who? The voice in the chains. The human froze. The air vibrated, and the city's central AI spoke again. Not in command tones, but in the child's language, in her mother's voice. Daughter of two worlds, it said. Remember who you are. The mother staggered forward, tears burning down her face. That voice, that's mine. And then the chains moved not to restrain but to protect. They coiled around the spire, shielding the girl as energy pulsed upward in a beam that tore through the clouds. The human stared, blinded by light, realizing too late what was happening. The city wasn't dying. It was waking up, and the child was the key. The city burned from within. Towers that had stood for centuries now shuddered under the weight of rebellion. The metal chains that once bound the towers in place cracked open like veins spilling light instead of blood. The once unbreakable capital of the Dominion was alive with the sound of uprising. Drones malfunctioning, banners torn, alarms wailing into the crimson dawn. Smoke rose from every level, twisting around the black spire like a mourning shroud. The human and the alien woman ran through the chaos, breath ragged, hearts pounding, their only thought the same, the child. The beam of light that had erupted from the spire hours ago still pulsed faintly in the sky, like a scar across heaven. She's there, the mother gasped. They took her to the Ascension Chamber. That's where the council hides the old archives. Then that's where we're going, the human said. But before they reached the gates, the mother stopped abruptly, clutching the side of a collapsed data terminal. The walls of the corridor flickered with faint holograms, records from the network she had unknowingly awakened. They shimmered, ghost-like, revealing faces, experiments, and words written in two languages, human and her own. "This isn't possible," she whispered. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. The hologram stabilized, showing a laboratory under twin suns, humans and her kind standing together. "Project Genesis," a voice said in the recording, distorted but still clear. "The covenant is complete. Genetic synthesis successful. The divergence will ensure peace through separation." The mother's eyes widened. "No," she breathed. "They didn't just ally with your kind, they merged with them. We share the same origin." The human frowned. "What do you mean?" "We were one species," she whispered. "Long ago, your ancestors and mine. They altered our DNA to divide us, to build civilizations apart so the wars would stop. But it didn't stop anything. It only erased the memory of what we were." He stared at the projection, speechless. The implications were staggering. "You're saying humanity and your people are two halves of the same creation," she finished. "You and I were kin." Her voice broke on the word. He stepped closer, the revelation twisting something deep inside him. "That's why you recognized me," he said softly. "Not from memory, from instinct." The holograms shifted again, revealing the scientists behind the project. One human stood out, a familiar face, his eyes weary but kind. The mother's breath hitched. "That's him," she said. "The man I saw in the visions. The one who made the covenant. He looks like—" The human began, but stopped, unable to finish, because the man on the recording looked almost exactly like him. The same eyes, the same scar. "He called himself Commander Immerse," the recording continued. "Last survivor of Earth's first expedition. If this experiment fails, let the truth survive. Let them find each other again." The hologram faded. Silence fell heavy between them. "Your blood carries his signature," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're his descendant." He shook his head, trying to process it. "And you?" "I was made from the same line," she said softly. "My kind evolved from the altered branch of his work. We're the result of his attempt to make peace permanent." The truth hit them both like gravity itself. They had been enemies, savior and saved, lovers in another lifetime, and all along, they were two fragments of the same forgotten creation. The sound of explosions outside pulled them back. The rebellion was spreading through the city as the network broadcast fragments of the revelation. Holograms flared across the towers. Images of humans and aliens working side by side. Faces erased from history. Citizens watched in shock. Soldiers hesitated to fire. The illusion of purity was dying. "They'll come for her," the human said. "The council will use the child to erase this again. Then we stop them," the mother replied, her eyes burning with renewed strength. They raced toward the Ascension Chamber, navigating through corridors collapsing under the strain of battle. But when they reached the final gate, a dozen armored sentinels stood waiting, weapons humming with lethal light. The mother stepped forward, spreading her arms. "I am the Queen of Chains," she declared, voice echoing through the chamber. "Stand down." The sentinels hesitated. Their internal systems flickered as her royal mark pulsed. But before they could respond, a command override rippled through the air. A colder voice filled the chamber. "Authorization revoked." The lead sentinel stepped forward. "Traitor identified. Child secured." "What did you do with her?" the human shouted, raising his weapon. The sentinel's visor flickered, revealing a live feed. Inside a containment sphere at the top of the spire, the child floated in suspended light, eyes closed, the chains of the city coiling around her like veins feeding into the tower. "She's being integrated," the sentinel said flatly. "Her genetic code completes the circle." The network will purge all corrupted data, including the rebellion. No! The mother screamed and lunged forward, unleashing a surge of energy from her mark. The blast threw the sentinel's back, but the shockwave nearly tore her apart. The human caught her before she fell. Stay with me, he urged. We can still reach her. She looked up, blood tracing silver lines down her face. They'll use her to reset everything, to erase both our species' link forever. Then we don't let them, he said fiercely. He helped her to her feet, and together they pushed through the burning halls toward the spire's upper level. But as they ascended, the power grid surged violently. Alarms blared, systems screamed. The council's failsafe had activated. Across the city, people fell to their knees as their neural links overloaded. Memories rewriting, history being erased in real time. It's starting, she whispered. They're wiping the truth. Then we make sure someone remembers, he said, pulling her toward the central core. If we can upload the data to the orbital relays, it'll spread beyond this world. And if we can't? She asked. He glanced toward the spire's glowing heart, where the child's silhouette hung motionless. Then we save her, and hope she remembers for us. The tower trembled as they climbed, every step a battle against heat, smoke, and gravity itself. The rebellion below was fading into static as the network consumed itself. And somewhere above them, the child's soft voice echoed faintly through the collapsing walls. Mama! He's calling me again. The mother froze. Who? The man in the light, the girl said. He says it's time. The human and the woman exchanged a terrified glance. The voice from the stars wasn't just calling her. It was activating her. Under the twin suns, the air shimmered like liquid fire. The execution grounds stretched across the desert like a scar. Pillars of blackened stone where rebels and dreamers had burned. The city's walls loomed behind it, their ivory towers glinting with the cold perfection of an empire built on obedience. And through that heat haze, staggering but unbroken, came the human. His armor was cracked, his blood turning to dust before it reached the ground, and still he carried on. Because she was there, somewhere beyond those walls, and their child was about to die. The guards had laughed when he first appeared at the gates. One human armed with nothing but a broken rifle and willpower. They laughed until the first tower fell. The sound of collapsing stone drowned their screams, and the desert wind carried the taste of freedom through the smoke. He didn't remember how many he killed. He only remembered the child's voice echoing from somewhere ahead, calling for her mother. That sound cut through him like light through glass, and it gave him strength he didn't know he still had. Inside the courtyard, the child stood on the platform, chains cutting into her wrists, her eyes wide not with fear but confusion. She had been told her father was dead, told the human would betray them, told this was her destiny. But when she saw him limping through the flames toward her, all those lies broke apart. Guardian! She screamed. The alien soldiers turned at the cry, their blades raised, their faces hidden behind mirrored masks. The human raised his weapon, pulled the trigger once, twice, then again until it clicked empty. Then he swung it like a club, shattering helmets, bones, and the illusion that one man could be broken by despair. He reached the child and tore the chains from her wrists. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped her. But he held her close, whispering, "You're safe now." The world tilted around them, the air rippling with heat, but for one heartbeat, time seemed to stop. He looked up and saw her, the alien mother, staggering through the dust at the edge of the courtyard. She was bleeding, the markings on her skin glowing faintly like dying embers. Her eyes met his, and something ancient passed between them. Recognition, memory, love that didn't belong to this lifetime, and yet it did. The alarms screamed. The twin suns began to dip, casting long shadows over the burning city. Drones circled overhead, and soldiers poured into the square. The human could barely stand. The mother tried to reach him, but her knees gave way. The child clung to both of them, her small voice trembling. "We can still run," she said. "We can hide." But the human shook his head. His voice was rough, broken. No more running. Something inside her shifted then. The mark on her shoulder, the one that tied her to the ancient network, began to blaze like molten gold. She felt memories she didn't own flood through her. Cities that were neither human nor alien. People who once shared the same heartbeat, the same promise. She saw the first covenant, an oath between their ancestors to preserve life together, not apart. And she saw how that oath had been twisted into the division that now defined them. She saw her kind enslaving the humans they had once called brothers. The knowledge hurt more than the wounds. It tore through her mind, her veins, her soul. But from that pain came clarity. She crawled toward him and laid her hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat falter. "You can't die," she whispered. "Not like this." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes from peace rather than hope. "Then live for me," he murmured. But she shook her head. "No, we live together." The energy inside her rose like a storm. Gold light bled from her veins, burning brighter with every breath. The child screamed as the ground trembled. The sky above them split into lines of blinding color, the mark's true power waking after centuries of silence. The soldiers hesitated, staring as her body began to dissolve into radiant threads. She was no longer just one being. She was memory, history, the light of both races intertwined. She reached for the human's hand, and as their fingers touched, his wounds stopped bleeding. The heat around them seemed to bend, cool, and flow. The air thickened, no longer scorching but soft, like the breath of a storm before rain. He tried to pull away, tried to tell her not to do this, but she only smiled and whispered, "You carried me through fire. Let me carry you through light." The suns burned white-hot overhead, then dimmed. The sand beneath them turned glassy, then crystalline. The human closed his eyes as her energy poured into him, through him, around him. For a moment he felt weightless, as if the universe itself held its breath. Then he felt coolness against his skin. Shade, water, impossible things in a desert of death. When the light faded, the courtyard was gone. In its place stood a garden, an oasis carved from pure crystal, shimmering under the faint glow of a single, eternal sun. In the center stood two figures, one human, one alien, their hands entwined, their forms captured forever in translucent stone. At their feet, a smaller shape, a child reaching upward, her tiny hands touching theirs. The rebellion ended that day. The city of chains became a city of ghosts. Centuries passed, and the desert swallowed everything. Only the oasis remained, untouched by time. Decades later, when explorers from distant colonies arrived, they found the place by accident. Their scanners had picked up an impossible reading, cool temperatures in a dead zone, traces of water where none should exist. They stepped into the oasis and stared in silence at the crystal monument. The twin suns reflected in the clear pool below, and the air hummed faintly, as if alive. One of the explorers, a historian, reached out and brushed the statue's surface. It was warm. Beneath her touch, faint lights flickered inside the crystal. 2 heartbeats, still there, still in rhythm. Her companion knelt beside the smaller figure. "Do you think they were real?" he asked quietly. The historian didn't answer at first. She traced the outline of the woman's face, then the human's. Both were worn but kind, strong yet gentle. "Real?" she finally whispered. "Maybe more real than we are." When they returned to their ship, they left offerings at the statue's base. Flowers, fragments of old human metal, an alien sigil carved from bone. The air shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging the gesture. And then, as they walked away, a sound rippled through the oasis. Faint, like an echo carried from far away. A child's laugh. The explorers turned, startled. Nothing moved. The wind was still. But somewhere in the refracted light of the crystal, they thought they saw a shadow. 2 figures, walking hand in hand under the eternal sun, a small child skipping between them. The mirage faded slowly, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of rain. Back aboard the ship, as they lifted off, the historian looked down one last time. From orbit, the oasis looked like an eye carved into the desert, glowing softly, endlessly, as if watching the stars. She felt something stir deep inside her, a memory that wasn't hers, a voice whispering through the static of her communicator, because no one else would. She froze, staring at the readout. "Did you hear that?" she asked, but her crewmate shook his head. The voice came again, faint but certain, because no one else would. Outside, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, and the crystal oasis caught the last light of day. It shone brighter than ever, not burning, not fading, but alive. A reminder that somewhere between despair and devotion, between blood and starlight, two souls had defied extinction. And their light, the light that never fades, still waited for those who remembered why they stayed.